Marcus, stop! Don't you dare pour that stuff! Karen's voice cracked through the humid air, echoing over the pool where her siblings splashed without a care. The greenish liquid shimmered in my hand, reflecting the sun, calm, steady, and final. For weeks, they'd turned my home into their playground, wet footprints on my floors, food scattered on my dining table, laughter shaking my living room walls. Karen called it community bonding. I called it trespassing. I'd warned her, again and again, but Karen Whitmore, our proud HOA president, never listened. So today, I stopped talking, and as her family laughed behind her, I tilted the bottle, one drop, and their perfect day was over. By noon, my backyard no longer felt like mine. The smell of sunscreen, grilled meat, and Karen's perfume had already taken over. Her brother lounged on my deck chair, dripping pool water onto the cushions I'd just cleaned the night before. Two kids, and I didn't even know their names, chased each other around my pool, splashing chlorinated water onto my sliding doors, while Karen herself sat at my dining table, sipping lemonade she hadn't asked for permission to take. Inside, my TV played a game. I wasn't even watching, because Karen's teenage son had taken my remote. She called it community bonding. I called it trespassing with confidence. When I built this home 3 years ago, I chose it for the peace, open spaces, quiet weekends, a private pool framed by palms and fresh green grass. But lately, the only thing I could hear was Karen Whitmore's voice echoing through every corner. Marcus! The kids are hungry. Could you grill a few more burgers? She'd shout, waving her phone like a queen commanding her servant, and I'd just stare, jaw tight, trying to remember why I ever thought a neighborhood HOA was a good idea. It started small, a quick dip after the HOA meeting last month. Karen claimed she forgot her towel, then asked to borrow one of mine. The next week, her siblings joined in. By the third week, my home had become their Saturday resort. Every time I hinted at boundaries, she'd flash her perfect smile and say, "Oh, Marcus, you're just too generous. We'll be gone in no time." But they never were. They'd leave water puddles across my hardwood floors, snack crumbs on my sofa, and muddy footprints in my kitchen. Once, her brother even used my shower, uninvited, because he'd got sunscreen in his eyes. I wish I were making that up. The HOA bylaws said nothing about pool usage rights, but Karen twisted every rule until it bent her way. As HOA president, she believed she owned the neighborhood, and my patience. The neighbors saw it too, but they were scared to confront her. "It's just how Karen is," they'd whisper. "Don't get on her bad side," but I was already on it. That morning, as the sun climbed higher, I watched through my kitchen window while her family splashed in my pool again. Their laughter bounced off the water like mockery. My deck looked like a public park. Towels draped over chairs, soda cans on the grass, bright floaties drifting in the water. And there was Karen, lounging on my pool float, sunglasses glinting in the sun. "Marcus," she yelled, "you should join us." "You look so lonely up there," I smiled back. But it wasn't the kind of smile she thought it was. I'd been patient. Too patient. But patience has a limit, and mine had quietly expired. That afternoon, while her family dozed on my furniture, I stood in the shade of my cabin and watched them through the window. Their laughter blurred into background noise as I noticed something I hadn't before: how comfortable they were. How natural it seemed for them to take and take and take. Karen's voice cut through again, playful and commanding. "Oh, Marcus, be a dear and refill the ice." I walked toward the cooler, nodding once, quietly. But this time, I wasn't refilling anything. I was planning. Because when people like Karen never hear the word no, they start thinking it doesn't exist, and soon, I was going to remind her exactly where her authority ended, right at the edge of my pool. The next few days blurred into one long, unwanted pool party. Every morning, before I could even make coffee, I'd hear Karen's voice outside. "Kids, remember, no running on Marcus's deck," she'd shout, as if managing my house made her noble. By noon, they'd invade again, splashing, eating, laughing, tossing floats into my garden. My backyard looked like a festival, and my patience evaporating. One afternoon, I came home early from work. My shoes crunched against the driveway gravel, and I heard the unmistakable rhythm of my outdoor speaker system, blasting a pop playlist I didn't even know existed. When I opened the glass door, I froze. My living room was soaked. Wet footprints led from the pool straight through the hall. My couch cushions were half off the sofa, and my remote actually floated, in a puddle near the coffee table. Karen's teenage niece laughed, pointing. "Oops, we were just drying off inside. Hope you don't mind, Marcus." Karen appeared behind her, wearing my towel like a robe. "Marcus, you really should invest in better flooring. This laminate gets slippery." I clenched my jaw. "Karen," I said evenly, "you're not supposed to be in my house." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she waved me off. "You left the door unlocked. No apology. No embarrassment. Just that same infuriating confidence. They'd crossed a line. Again. I spent the evening cleaning up, my mop scraping across the floor while their laughter echoed from the pool. Outside the window, Karen sipped a drink, feet up, enjoying the view. Every drop of water I pushed across the tiles made my heartbeat slower, steadier. She thought I was harmless. She thought silence meant surrender. The next day, her family came with even more people, 2 cousins this time, and an uncle who wanted to see the famous pool. I stood at the patio door as they barged in, pretending not to notice me. My grill smoked, my fridge emptied, my patience frayed. Then came the breaking point. Her brother, the one who always claimed to help with setup, stumbled near the pool carrying a tray of drinks. He slipped. The tray flew. A glass shattered against my poolside tiles, scattering sharp pieces into the water. I rushed forward. "Stop! Don't—" Too late. A kid jumped in, splashing through the shards. Karen didn't even flinch. Accidents happen. Marcus, relax. I'll call someone to clean it later. Later. I stood there, staring at the pool, the faint tint of blood mixing with sunlight. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something colder. That night, I couldn't sleep. The echoes of her laughter filled my head. My home, my sanctuary, wasn't mine anymore. It was a playground for a tyrant in sunglasses. At midnight, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark, still pool. The reflections of string lights danced across the surface. I could almost hear them laughing again. That's when I saw it. Karen's purse sitting on my patio table. Inside, her HOA badge glinted faintly under the porch light. HOA President, authority over everything, except me. I smiled for the first time in weeks because for once I wasn't angry. I was inspired. They loved my pool so much. They wanted to treat it like their own. Then I'd give them a memory they'd never wash off. I turned from the window, grabbed a notepad, and began sketching. A simple plan, a satisfying one. And at the top of the page, I wrote 3 words in bold letters. For Karen's family. The next morning was quiet, unnaturally quiet. For the first time in weeks, I woke to the sound of birds instead of splashing water. The pool glimmered under the early light, still and undisturbed. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, almost believing the nightmare had ended. But peace never lasts long with Karen Whitmore around. At exactly 11, I heard it again, the creak of my back gate, followed by her voice. "Smooth as sugar and twice as fake? Marcus! We brought snacks!" I didn't move. I let them settle in. Towels spread, music playing, laughter bubbling back to life like it owned the place. But today, I wasn't angry. Today, I was focused. On the counter beside me sat a small glass jar filled with a faintly glowing greenish powder. It wasn't poison and not even close, but it was enough to turn the clean, blue water of my pool into a bubbling mess of chaos once it reacted to chlorine. Completely harmless to people, but devastating for any pool system and filter line. Karen wanted to swim? Fine, I'd let her swim in that for 2 days. I prepared everything quietly. First, I adjusted the pH balance of the pool, making sure the reaction would be as visible as possible. A sudden bloom of swirling green and white when the powder hit. Then I positioned small cameras inside the patio lights, all synced to my phone. If chaos erupted, I'd have every second on video. Each night, as the sun dipped below the trees, I'd stand by the water and watch the reflections of my house shimmer across the surface. The calm felt almost poetic, like the pool itself was waiting with me. Karen didn't notice a thing. On the third afternoon, she showed up again, earlier than usual. Her voice carried through the open windows like an unwanted song. "Marcus, we're back for our daily dip. You didn't miss us, did you?" I stepped onto the patio, towel in hand, pretending to dry a chair. "Couldn't possibly," I said, smiling faintly. She laughed, taking it as a joke. "You're such a good sport." Her siblings were already splashing around. One of them accidentally knocked over a lantern from my outdoor table, cracking the glass. I didn't react, and not even a flinch. Karen noticed. "You okay, Marcus? You seem quiet," she said, tilting her head. "I'm just letting you all enjoy yourselves," I replied, voice calm, deliberate. For the first time, she hesitated. Maybe it was the tone, or maybe the stillness in my expression. But she brushed it off quickly, flipping her hair and wading into the pool. The green powder jar sat inside my pocket, cool against my palm. Not yet, not now. Timing was everything. That evening, after they finally left, I sat on the edge of the pool, dipping my fingers into the water. The surface shimmered, glassy and innocent. My reflection looked calm, but my mind raced with satisfaction. Tomorrow would be the last day Karen Whitmore ever called this her community pool. The plan was simple. She'd come in for her usual afternoon swim, her family loud and unaware. I'd greet them, smile, and let the moment breathe. Then, when they were at their loudest, when Karen laughed her biggest laugh, I'd pour it in. The color would spread instantly. The shock would ripple faster than the water itself, and I'd just stand there, quiet, collected, and done. That night, I placed the jar on my dining table next to my phone. The porch light outside flickered softly, casting a faint glow over the pool. The surface reflected everything, my calm face, my clean plan, and a silent promise. Tomorrow wasn't going to be loud, it was going to be poetic. The next day began with sunlight spilling across the patio, so bright it almost felt symbolic. I opened the curtains and looked out over the pool. Sparkling. Still, flawless. Everything was ready. I brewed my coffee and waited. 10:45 a.m. Right on schedule, Karen's laughter floated over the fence like a storm warning. "Kids! Sunscreen first!" she shouted, as if this was her backyard, her domain. Then, without hesitation, she and her siblings pushed the gate open and poured in. Coolers, towels, speakers, pool floats. It looked like a festival, not a visit. I stepped out with a polite nod, towel over my shoulder. "Morning," I said. Karen beamed. "Marcus, you don't mind if we start early, do you? It's such a gorgeous day." Her siblings were already diving in, splashing water across my deck and soaking my outdoor furniture. One of them spilled orange soda on the concrete. "No, Karen," I said calmly. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I smiled. "Just life changes quickly." She gave me a suspicious look, but waved it off and slid into the pool, laughing loudly. That's when I walked to the poolside table. The green jar was waiting there, half hidden under a towel. I picked it up, feeling the cool glass against my fingers. Karen's sister splashed water in my direction. "Lighten up, Marcus. You're no fun anymore." "Oh, don't worry," I said. "This will be fun." As they cheered and played, I opened the jar, tilting it slowly. Tiny emerald flecks caught the sunlight. The moment the powder hit the water, the surface rippled. And a faint shimmer spread out, slow at first, then faster. Like dye blooming in fabric, Karen was laughing mid-sentence when she noticed it. "Wait, what's happening to the water?" The pool shifted colors, from clear blue to swirling hues of green and white, bubbling faintly as it spread. Her siblings froze. Karen?" The music kept playing, upbeat, oblivious, but the visuals turned surreal. The clean turquoise pool now looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, glimmering and alive. Karen scrambled out, dripping wet and furious. "What did you do?" I stayed calm. "Oh, just a little experiment. Thought I'd add some color to your routine." She stomped toward me, water dripping down her dress. You ruined the pool. This is HOA property. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. My name's still on the deed. The siblings started panicking, yelling that their eyes stung. It wasn't dangerous, just a mild chlorine imbalance, but enough to cause chaos. Karen was yelling, waving her phone. You'll pay for this, Marcus. I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling the police. Please do, I said evenly. I'd love to explain how the HOA president has been trespassing on private property for weeks. She froze. Her siblings fell, silent. Karen's face went pale, the kind of pale that comes when someone realizes the tables have turned. I gestured toward the security camera, blinking quietly above the patio door. Every visit, every splash, every time you've broken in, it's all recorded. For the first time, she didn't have words. The green-tinted pool bubbled behind her, shimmering under the afternoon light, the perfect image of karma. Vivid, cinematic, poetic. Karen, I said softly. I asked nicely. I tried politely. You wouldn't listen, so I decided to speak in your language and drama. She clenched her fists. You'll regret this. Maybe, I replied, walking back inside. But at least I'll enjoy my coffee in peace. Behind me, her siblings were gathering their things, still dripping wet, muttering to each other. The pool hissed softly as the reaction slowed, the surface now an eerie shade of jade. Karen stayed behind for a moment, glaring at the water, then at me through the glass door. Her reflection on the window looked small now, and for the first time, she didn't yell, just silence, the kind that finally felt earned. By afternoon, my peaceful backyard had turned into a stage. Karen stood outside my gate, wrapped in a towel, dripping wet and screaming at the top of her lungs. He poisoned my family, she yelled, waving her phone like a flag. He put chemicals in the pool. The neighbors began to gather, drawn by her voice like moths to a flame. Kids stopped riding their bikes. A couple across the street peeked through the curtains. I stood calmly on the porch, arms crossed, watching. I didn't need to say a word. You're finished, Marcus, she snapped. I'm calling the HOA, the cops, everyone. Karen, I said softly, you are the HOA. That made her falter for half a second. But she recovered fast, pacing, ranting, gesturing wildly toward the pool that still shimmered faintly green in the sunlight. You're dangerous. You're a menace to this neighborhood. Her siblings stood behind her, embarrassed and shivering. One of them muttered, Karen, maybe we should just go. No, she barked. He's getting reported. I stepped down the porch stairs slowly, the sound of my shoes echoing against the patio tiles. Karen, I said, I warned you. I asked you to stop trespassing. I asked you not to use my home like it was a community resort. But you wouldn't listen. She jabbed her finger toward me. This is harassment. You think you can humiliate me in front of the neighborhood. I tilted my head. No, Karen, you're doing that all by yourself. A ripple of murmurs spread through the small crowd. The neighbor across the fence, old Mr. Hollis, stepped forward. Karen, I seen you and your folks in his pool all week. You can't just go using people's homes. Karen spun toward him, shocked. You're taking his side. Another woman chimed in. You've been overstepping for months, Karen. We're all tired of it. Karen's face turned red, her mouth opening and closing like she was drowning in her own words. She wasn't used to being outnumbered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Then came the final blow. The sound of sirens echoed faintly down the street. A police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing in the sunlight. Karen straightened instantly, flipping her hair back and smirking. Finally, she muttered. Justice. The officer stepped out, tall, calm, professional. Afternoon, he said. We got a report of a chemical incident? Karen jumped in. Yes! He tried to poison us! The officer looked at the pool, then at the small jar still sitting on the table. He picked it up, turned it over, and read the label. Pool pH stabilizer. Non-toxic. Used for water clarity. Karen froze. The officer looked up. Ma'am, this is standard maintenance powder. The crowd chuckled. Karen's expression cracked. For a second, she looked almost human, not furious but frightened. But he did it on purpose. The officer raised an eyebrow. Did you have permission to be in his pool? Karen blinked. I'm the HOA president. Not what I asked, the officer said calmly. Silence. Every neighbor stared. Even her siblings looked down at their feet. I finally spoke, voice steady. I told you before, Karen. You can't trespass and expect hospitality. This isn't a resort, the officer sighed and nodded toward me. Sir, we'll file a report on the trespassing issue. As for you, ma'am, I'd suggest drying off and staying off private property. Karen's eyes filled with tears of rage, not because she was hurt, but because she had lost control. She turned away abruptly, wrapping her towel tighter. This isn't over, she muttered, storming off with her siblings trailing behind her. The officer gave me a knowing look. You've got more patience than I do, I smiled faintly. I ran out of patience. That's why I got creative. As they left, the sunlight hit the water just right. The pool sparkled again, almost back to its clear blue, a perfect metaphor for peace returning. The crowd dispersed, some shaking their heads, others whispering. For the first time in months, I felt like the neighborhood was looking at me not as a pushover, but as someone who stood his ground. And somewhere down the street, Karen was probably plotting her next move. But I didn't care anymore, because that day, she didn't just lose a pool, she lost control of the narrative. 2 days later, the HOA office looked like a courtroom after the verdict. I hadn't planned to go, but curiosity got the better of me. When I walked in, the fluorescent lights flickered over a dozen people whispering in tight clusters. At the center sat Karen Whitmore, her hair tied back, sunglasses on, pretending to read from a clipboard she hadn't touched in 10 minutes. The room fell quiet as I entered. Someone muttered, "That's him." Karen didn't look up. I almost smiled. The same woman who once strutted across lawns barking orders now couldn't even make eye contact. "Marcus," said Bill, one of the committee members, breaking the silence. "We heard about what happened. You doing all right?" "Never better," I said evenly. He nodded. Karen's facing a formal complaint for misuse of HOA authority and trespassing. "The board's voting next week." Karen slammed her clipboard down. "This is ridiculous. I was invited. He didn't tell us not to come." I turned toward her. "Karen, I sent you 3 emails asking you to stop bringing people into my property." "That was a misunderstanding," she said through gritted teeth. "You know everyone loves your pool, Marcus. It's like part of the community." "Funny," I said. "The community never paid for its upkeep." There was a small chuckle from the back of the room. Karen shot the crowd a glare that could melt steel. Bill sighed. "Karen, this isn't just about the pool. It's about respect. About boundaries." Karen's jaw tightened. "So what, I'm suddenly the villain?" A woman from the corner, Mrs. Jensen, spoke up. "You've been acting like you own everyone's home for years. You made rules nobody agreed on. Maybe it's time you let someone else lead." For a second, it looked like Karen might explode again. But instead, she leaned back, folded her arms, and muttered, "You'll regret this." I glanced at the board and said quietly, "No one here regrets peace, Karen, just noise." Then I walked out, the murmurs following me down the hall. Outside, the world felt lighter, almost cinematic in its peace. The lawns glowed under the morning sun, birds fluttered across mailboxes, and for once, no one was watching me like I was an intruder in my own home. By afternoon, the whispers had spread through the whole neighborhood. People stopped me on walks just to talk. "I can't believe you finally stood up to her," one said. "She had it coming," said another. Every comment was like a quiet vindication. At sunset, I sat by the pool, clean, calm, perfect again. The water shimmered in golden hues as if mocking the chaos it once held. I dipped my hand in, watching ripples spread out in slow circles. It was strange, the silence felt almost foreign after months of constant intrusion. But it was the kind of silence I could get used to. Then I noticed something odd. A small envelope tucked under one of the pool chairs. Karen's. Handwriting. I opened it carefully. "Marcus, you got what you wanted. Enjoy your pool. I hope the peace is worth the loneliness. K." I stared at it for a while, not angry, not smug, Just thoughtful because in her own twisted way, she was right. Peace does come with loneliness, but I'd rather be lonely in silence than suffocated in chaos. As the sky shifted to orange and pink, I leaned back, watching the reflection of clouds ripple across the pool surface. For once, it was just mine. No laughter, no splashes, no shouting, just the soft hum of the filter and the sound of peace returning to its rightful owner. And somewhere in the distance, the HOA's perfect little empire began to crumble, not with a bang, but with whispers and quiet resentment. A week later, a small notice appeared on the HOA board. Effective immediately. Karen Whitmore has stepped down as HOA president. No dramatic speech, no grand farewell, just a single line printed on thin paper, like the final breath of an empire that ran out of air. I read it twice, not out of disbelief, but closure. The neighborhood felt different, almost overnight. The tension was gone, replaced by a kind of soft normalcy no one realized they'd missed. People started greeting each other again. Kids rode bikes across lawns without Karen storming out to shout about rules. Even the morning air felt lighter, as if the whole place had exhaled at once. I sat on my patio, sipping coffee while sunlight danced over the pool. The water was clear again, cleaner, brighter than it had ever been. It shimmered with the same blue hue that had once been her playground. Now it was just mine. I caught my reflection on the surface. Calm, confident, and finally in control. A sound made me glance toward the gate. Karen was standing there. Not shouting this time, not even holding her clipboard, just standing. I didn't move or speak. After a long pause, she said quietly, "I came to apologize." That surprised me more than anything. She took a hesitant step forward. "I went too far. I shouldn't have used your home like that. I let power get to my head." I didn't reply, not because I didn't forgive her, but because forgiveness sometimes doesn't need words. She looked around the yard, the patio, the furniture, the pool she used to dominate. "You've done a good job keeping it all beautiful," she said softly. "It was always beautiful," I said. "You just never looked at it that way." She gave a faint smile, the first genuine one I'd ever seen from her, then nodded and turned to leave. As she walked away, I noticed something. She looked smaller now, not in size, but in presence, like someone finally stripped of their costume. When the gate closed behind her, I exhaled. The wind rippled across the water, soft and rhythmic, almost like applause. That evening, I turned on the patio lights and let the glow fall across the water. My house, once a battlefield, now felt like home again. I thought about how simple things become complicated when control replaces kindness. Karen wasn't evil. She was just blinded by her need to own peace instead of share it. But life, in its quiet fairness, always rebalances. That night, as crickets hummed and the world settled down, I realized something. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the mastery of silence. I leaned back, took one last sip of my coffee and smiled at the reflection of the stars on the water, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to defend what was mine, because I'd already won, not through revenge, but through restraint, not by destroying her, but by letting her destroy herself. Sometimes you don't have to raise your voice to win a war, you just have to let silence speak louder than noise. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, and subscribe for more HOA drama, where karma always finds its way home.